The characters are teens, so why do the stories appeal to so many adults? We'll discuss this growing trend with critically acclaimed breakout novelists Adam Silvera and David Arnold. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, David,
Yes.
tell me just real quick, what's Mosquito Land about?
It's about a girl who gets on a bus from Jackson to Ohio to discover the dark truth about her mother. But that's really not what it's about at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and more happy than not?
It's about a 16-year-old boy growing up in the South Bronx. At the same time, a memory alteration procedure becomes available to the public, and he's hoping to use this procedure to forget that he's gay, because he thinks leading a life as a straight teenager will be an easier life for him.
I read your books. I loved your books. I got some questions for you.
Okay.
Mim in Mosquito Land has an aunt who gives her advice. She says, you should write. It's better than succumbing to the madness of the world.
Right.
Do you feel like characters trying to avoid the madness of the world is sort of a theme in both your books?
I think so. And I think the definition of madness is certainly called into question. And I think teens especially are, I've actually said this before, but I feel like teens want to understand the value of the world and have the world understand their own value. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's sort of, like if you can answer that, you can answer almost anything. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the case with my book, Aaron Soto's kind of growing up in this kind of intolerant neighborhood where he's finally meeting someone who is helping him to kind of like escape something that escape a certain kind of like attitude on his block that, was kind of like pre-existing and has kind of like carved new ways for him. And I think that's ultimately what like young adult fiction sometimes tends to have a really great spotlight on, just kind of opportunities to kind of reinvent yourself.
Were there bumps along the way as you figured out who you are as writers? Kind of the same way your characters had bumps along the way as they figured out who they were as young adults.
Yeah, I mean, I think every book I'm writing is, I write for myself before like anyone else, before like any kind of category, and More Happy Than Not in its first draft, like in its very first incarnation, was kind of very therapeutic and taught me a lot about myself and helped me to kind of see the light on why other people acted in the ways they did. And I'm working on my third book now, and I'm just kind of rediscovering myself through each process. I'm kind of discovering myself as like the characters are.
Right, right. Are there styles or voices that you've tried in the past that just haven't worked for you?
I'm sure there will be styles and voices that I try in the future, but Mosquito Land was my first real go at a serious-ish novel.
Right.
And I mean, it basically was me. I was sort of terrified into writing it. I really turned to it when my wife and I found out we were going to have a baby, and it wasn't part of our plan. And then it was decided that I would be a stay-at-home dad, and so I very much felt like I was writing myself out of a corner.
Right.
And so that's kind of how the book came to be. So I kind of like, I have some friends who went through a lot of other books before they got to that book, and I, for better or worse, that wasn't the case for me. And so I do feel like I'm gonna have to go through some of those hurdles in the future.
Right, right. Well, you've both really benefited from a supportive group of other writers, particularly in the young adult, the YA scene.
Yeah.
It seems like writers are so supportive of one another. What difference has that made for you in your journey with your first book?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I owe so many people. The book never would have happened without, I'm not going to start naming people because there are just too many,
Right.
But from my early SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, from my early days in that, and meeting other authors who were doing things the right way and were doing things the way that I was able to sort of pattern my own behavior and my own, not just writing habits, but sort of personality after, was just invaluable, for sure.
Yeah, and I didn't go to college, so I kind of took some like creative writing classes after high school. I immersed myself in the book industry. I worked as a bookseller in children's publishing, but yeah, I mean, like the community was just like so welcoming and so receptive and so giving, and it really is just kind of it was. Yeah, I don't know where I would have been without them. It really kind of made me feel like the college stuff was kind of secondary to what everyone kind of makes it sound like, that you need college to kind of succeed as a writer, and that's not true. But you immerse yourself in kind of that community, and everything will kind of find its way into place.
And it's not just more advantageous to have the community; it makes it more fun. Like I wouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
have as much fun doing it.
I know, we became like best friends like after meeting through our books and through our our publication process. So.
And then I stumbled upon you here at Climb National.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's it been like for you to be on the other side of the book selling process? Having been a bookseller and having written reviews of other people's books, what's it like now?
Yeah, I mean, the reviewing stuff was also like very instrumental. I actually put into practice reviewing my own book when I'm like in the drafting stage, so I can kind of like identify like its strengths and its weaknesses, and I kind of review it through every draft.
So you would write a draft and then go, now I'm going to review my book.
Exactly, and it's never like something like extremely egotistical, like, oh my god, this paragraph was glorious or whatever. It's just
Star
more
review.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a genius.
Exactly. It's more like, okay, identify the weakness, and then by the next draft, I should have like tackled that and improved upon it. But yeah, it's really nice being on the other side. You know, I worked in two children's bookstores, and I had my launch party at my my favorite children's bookstore, Books of Wonder in New York, and
your
it was just
home store.
Yeah, it's my home store, and it was really nice to actually be on the other side of that table instead of setting up for the author who was like coming to the event. And it's been all very dream come true.
That's awesome. Okay, let's talk about young adult, the YA label. And I know it's got, in one way, it can be a wonderful thing because it really makes sure that your books get into the hands of people who know that they love YA and go looking for the next great YA book. But I also wonder, could it ever be sort of limiting if people think of your books as, well, this is YA and I don't read YA, could they be missing out on something great? I'm not a young adult by anyone's standards, and I love both your books.
I mean, I think with any genre, you're risking missing out on something. I don't read nearly enough nonfiction, and I'm missing out on like the actual legit wonders of the world as a result of it. But yeah, I think with young adult especially, like I never try to write the book like for a specific teenager. Like again, as I mentioned earlier, I write for myself, and I just happen to be writing about situations fit for a teenager. And there's so many books. It all really just comes down to marketing and kind of moving away from that and detaching from like what they think a young adult book is.
Right. I think some of the bravest literature out there right now is coming out with the young adult label. So I couldn't be more proud to be part of that. Like, it just makes me excited to be part of it. But like Adam said, I'd never sit down and say, okay, time to write a young adult novel.
Right.
You just have to write the voice that's in your head, and then let the people who are experts in marketing decide where to shelve it.
Right. Well, it seems like if you walk through bookstores and you peek down the YA aisles, you don't see just teenagers standing there. You see grown-ups, and not just parents who are shopping for their kids, but
you see me, and
you see me.
Yeah.
I mean, you see me there for sure. What do you think it is about that time of life that makes a touchstone for people? Why do people want to go back and read a voice of a teenager?
I mean, I can't speak for other people, but for me, it's not that I want to read the voice of a teenager so much as I want to read good books.
Yeah.
And I know so many good books that are YA, and I've now gotten to meet a lot of the authors writing them, and some of them have become heroes of mine, and I very much want to read all of the things that they've published. So for me, it's just because they're amazing books.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times in these conversations, we're always kind of touching upon like the universal component of things. Like we were all teenagers. We all remember like first love, first heartbreak, first grief, all these, kind of powerful moments in our life. And I kind of prefer that versus a lot of the stories about, things in the adult life territory that I personally haven't experienced that either too. Like I've never been married. I haven't been divorced yet either as a result. So it's kind of, for me, there's just something about the heightened emotions. It's very charged and kind of worth living in.
Yeah. Oh, the characters in both of your books, in Mosquito Land and in More Happy Than Not, are working through the process of figuring out, I think as one of your characters says, who they are and who they are not. Yeah. And it seems like maybe that's something that we all keep struggling with as we grow older, and maybe we think we're not going to, but we do.
Yeah, I don't think that ever ends. Like you're constantly trying to figure out.
And you're constantly reinventing yourself. Like I don't think you hit 21 and all of a sudden you're a realized adult, And and I think I've gotten a lot of comments about my ending, and where I think people were expecting a lot of concrete solutions to things. I'm like, no, he's 17 when that book ends. Like you do not know who you're going to be when you're 18. You don't know who you're going to be 17 years and 1 week later. You're really constantly reinventing yourself, and whether it's 17 or 20 or 21 or 30 or 40.
Right. It just keeps going.
Yeah.
I don't know who I am.
Exactly.
For sure. I'd love to talk a little bit about diversity in books, particularly for readers. I mean, we're all reading your books, but especially for people who are picking those books up and they are the ages of the characters in the books. It is so important that people see characters who remind them of themselves. How do you feel about sort of the state of young adult literature right now in terms of diversity?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we live, literature should reflect life, and we live in a diverse world, and that should be on the page. I mean, yeah, I mean, it absolutely is a necessity, I think.
Yeah.
No, and we have like the We Need Diverse Books initiative that kind of began in summer of 2014, I believe, and it certainly improved things for so many authors, especially as like paved the way for someone like me who has a book with a Puerto Rican narrator who's, you know, kind of discovering that he's gay, and like these are not books that are kind of talked about in like recent years, and it's so important, especially, you know, I grew up in the Bronx where like I didn't realize that I was living in a diverse setting, you know, and all of a sudden I'm discovering that my life is just diverse, and I didn't realize that I was in this kind of other category until very recently, and it's been kind of I don't know, enlightening for me to see that a lot of people are not necessarily always exposed to the kind of neighborhoods where I, you know, grew up in. So I definitely just think it's especially important for teenagers to kind of have those opportunities to, you know, witness other experiences and really putting these books on like very visible shelves.
Right, right. And there's no one perspective that is diverse. Diversity means you've got a whole bunch of different perspectives out there. That's the meaning of it. But when I finished More Happy Than Not, I held it in my hands and I was like, we have to get this into every library and every school, because that's just not that's the first time I've read a voice of someone in that particular space.
And hearing you talk about it makes me want to reread it. I need a More Happy Than Not reread.
Mosquito Land, it's kind of a road trip story.
Yeah.
Did you have any classic road trip stories in mind as you were writing? It made me think a little bit of Thelma and Louise.
Yeah.
Except Mim was sort of Thelma and Louise.
Right. No, I really didn't. And in fact, when I first started writing it, it wasn't a road trip story at all. I moved around a little bit when I was a little kid, and I set out to write like a new kid at school story. So it started as, and actually the protagonist was male in the first couple of drafts.
Really?
Yeah, so it started with a boy moving with his dad and stepmom from Ohio to Mississippi, which are places that I've lived.
Right.
And starting at a school, and like the first couple of drafts, they were like 100 pages. They weren't novels.
Starts.
But yeah, right. Yeah. Were just of him at school and like all these weird things that happened. But as I was writing it, I realized that the real story was with his mom back in Ohio. And then once I realized that, like, the time that he spent at school got shorter and shorter and shorter until now it's like 2 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me, if you don't mind if I kind of wander a little bit, tell me about the decision to change that protagonist to a girl. How did that come about?
Well, first of all, I say, like, we're all people, and especially at that age, like, we've talked about identity, and like we all are struggling to find our identity, and I feel like that's a universal struggle, especially at that age. So I'd let a few people read it, and then my really good friend and critique partner, Courtney Stevens,
Love her.
Who wrote Faking Normal and is an amazing book. She just suggested that I might want to try writing from a female point of view. And when I was kind of like, well, okay, I guess I'll try it, you know. And then the minute I did, though, like, it opened everything up, and I knew that I'd really found the character for that story.
That's amazing. Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
People have compared More Happy Than Not to the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Eternal
you did.
Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And it's very handy. I talk about books with people all the time. It's wonderful to have a comparison point because it makes it quicker and easier to describe a book, and you don't have to start from zero and go, okay, here's where we are. But is it hard sometimes to hear it compared to something? Do you ever wish that people could just experience it as a brand new thing?
Yeah, I think it creates a certain expectation because I think a lot of times, you know, I worked in marketing too, so I remember, you know, kind of coming up with like comp titles like this too, and but you know, the stories are never identical. Like I had never even heard of Eternal Sunshine when I pitched it to a friend for the first time.
I can't believe how young you
That book is 11 years old, and the film is 11 years old, and it's like so I think a lot of teens today probably are like, what is this too?
Eternal what?
Like Jim Carrey did a serious movie, and so it's just yeah, I mean, I've seen some reviews where they're like, oh, you know, they pitch it to this, but it's not quite this, but I also love the direction it goes in. And it's like, you know, there's the one, you know, there's a memory institute in both the film and my book that kind of like bridges that comparison, but otherwise they're
so completely different.
Yeah, they're so different.
Completely different.
But yeah, so I mean, it you know, it creates the expectation, but it's worked out. I think it's helped the book find kind of a growing adult audience as well, which has been great.
Yeah, I was not a baby when that movie came out, so I totally got the reference. Speaking of that comparison, your book deals with a possible treatment that involves forgetting as a way of getting over things or moving forward with life. Do you think forgetting is really a useful thing to do, or is it even possible?
I mean, I there are things that you can forget organically, but I wouldn't advise it. Like if the Lateo Institute that provides the memory alteration procedure, if they actually existed, which by the way, like in real life, Sweden has been like developing this like memory erasure procedure for those with like post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's really not for like those who have like heartbreak or whatever. It's for like those experiencing tragedy.
A legitimate thing.
And again, it's not something that you approach lightly because it's brain surgery. But yeah, no, I definitely don't think that people should go forgetting themselves. I think that would kind of open up so many consequences and just really essentially erases your own identity. And again, like as we've talked about so many times, you're constantly reinventing yourself from like every year in your life, and then you're risking kind of, I don't know, gap periods where you've removed something that is essential and you don't have the opportunity to grow from it. I even got a tattoo that says happiness goes on, HGO, and I got it because of like past suicide attempts and like grief and heartbreak, and it's important for me to remember that like you eventually can emerge from the other side of things, and that happiness will eventually go on. But unless you've like survived a tragedy before, you don't know that.
Right, you don't know that you will come out on the other side.
Exactly.
At some point.
Which I think is why it's so charged, especially for like a young adult novel where a teenager is experiencing these things for the first time, and they don't have the sense of being 21 and remembering having their heart broken before.
Right. To switch gears just a little bit, one of the things that I loved about both Mosquito Land and More Happy Than Not was the importance of the mother characters. And in your book, you've got a mom who is not really there, and the whole purpose of Mim's road trip is to kind of find out what has happened to her mom, and that's a driving force. And then in More Happy Than Not, we've got I just love that mother character.
Oh, thank you.
And she's a hoot. I mean, she has the spelling bees where she lets the boys use all curse words just so they can get it out of their system. Like my mom did, yeah. Well, I was going to ask you.
Where'd you get that at?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how similar is that mom to your mom?
She's very similar. Yeah, my mom has definitely she's read the book a couple times now, and she refers to the character as herself. She refers to Aaron, the narrator,
it's basically a memoir.
With the addition of like a memory institute. But she'll read the book and she'll be like, "Oh, I love where you did this." And I'm like, "That wasn't me. That was Aaron." So she's very an adoring fan of her character in the book.
Right. Well, didn't I see? I think you tweeted. More Happy Than Not got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. Did your mom see it and see that it was a star and go, why is it just one star?
Yeah, she was like, I'm going to write to Publishers Weekly and ask them why they didn't give you 5 stars. And I'm like, well, Mom, like the star is like
I'm
my highest
2.
honor.
No, I'm going to write to him too.
You either get a star or you don't get a
star.
Exactly.
So, but no, she's been very cute about this whole publication process.
I love it.
I feel the need to say out loud that my mom is nothing like the mom in my book.
That's good. That's good. But where did the seed for that character start with you?
Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah. I do. Yeah, right. No. I do. Story always starts with character for me.
Right.
And so I think everything sort of stemmed out of Mim. And when I realized the situation being that she's with her dad and her stepmom, it did sort of make me go, okay, so what's going on with her mom?
Right.
And so it's sort of like, I think Mim's mom sort of revealed herself to me over the course of a longer period of time. It wasn't like I just had an idea for who her mom was.
I think that's part of what makes both of your books so relatable at any age, is that parents do have an important influence on the kids in the books. I felt like when I was growing up, there were a lot of shows on TV where it was like all the characters, and it's probably that way still now, all the characters are teenagers and you never see the parents, and it's like this bizarro society where it's like teenagers rule the world and nobody has any influence from their parents. I like that you all had that in there.
Yeah.
That felt very real to me. Okay. We're gonna do a lightning round now.
Okay.
Oh, geez.
Okay.
Okay.
And we're gonna bounce
I gotta
back.
get in care. Hang on.
Lightning round.
Ready.
All right.
All right.
Okay, we're gonna go back and forth. So I'm gonna start with you. You're gonna answer, then he's gonna answer. Then
The
you're
same
gonna
question?
Answer. Yeah. So,
Okay.
but we're gonna go
All
back
right.
and forth. So
Okay.
you, him, you,
Okay.
him.
Okay.
Got it?
All right.
Okay. What does your writing space look like?
Messy. So messy.
Okay.
I was a stay-at-home dad, so just couches, YMCA, like front rooms and beds and
Pacifiers.
tables and under tables and yeah, anywhere I could.
Okay, what's around you? And you sort of just answered this. Do you play music or is it quiet?
I make playlists for all my characters, but they're usually scores, soundtracks, non-lyrical.
Really? Okay, music or quiet?
Music, and I'll listen to the same song over and over again for at least about like 2 weeks, like the same song. Like I have very obsessive behaviors, but like, and that's one of them. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Book you loved as a kid?
Stella Luna, which is a picture book about a fruit bat. Yeah, that was like my favorite. That was my first favorite book ever. It's about the fruit bat who gets separated from her mother and lives amongst birds for a few days, and then it's like the ultimate like walking a mile in someone else's shoes book. Yeah, I had the doll and everything. It was great.
Mine was Pierre, a cautionary tale in 5
Yes.
chapters and a prologue by Maurice Sendak about a little boy who doesn't care about anything and ends up getting eaten by a lion.
Yeah,
Which is
perfect.
awesome. Yeah.
Great. Favorite thing about being in a bookstore or in a library, or both?
The community. I feel like I'm around my friends. It's the same feeling I had and have when I go to a record store. I love talking to people about music. I love talking to people about books. Yeah.
The solidarity and really just like the opportunities that of like, grabbing that right book and then like kind of, changing the course of things, whether it's like, eye-opening a certain situation for me. I love the opportunities that exist like in a bookstore.
Awesome. Well, the books are wonderful. I enjoyed them very, very much. I know I'm not the only one. They're getting some great reviews. So
Thank you.
Thank you so
thanks
much,
for
Mary
being
Laura.
here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm Mary Laura Philpott.
Keep reading.